Hey, what's up, everybody? David Bell here. Welcome to episode 52 of the Pocket Mastermind podcast. On this episode, I'm speaking with online entrepreneur Tom Libelt. Tom was born in Poland and moved with his family at the age of 10 to the US to escape communism. And growing up, he watched his parents take any job that they could just to survive, and he decided that wasn't going to be the life that he wanted to pursue. Since then, Tom has taken a very varied career from Kindle book publishing. He's owned a coffee shop, a retail store, a record label, and also made a documentary, all bootstrapped with no outside funding. Tom now spends most of his time in Chiang Mai in Thailand, where he runs his business, Smart Brand Marketing. And in this conversation, we discuss the ups and downs of being an entrepreneur, when it's time to stop the hustle, and how to progress for longevity and scalability in the online entrepreneurial space, amongst many other things. Now, if you're looking to start an online business or a side hustle, you're going to get a lot of value from this conversation. So listen right to the end. And please remember to leave us a review, subscribe, and share with your friends. And with that, let's get on with the show. So the big question is this: how do ordinary people like us that weren't born into money create true financial freedom, take back control of our lives, and live a life full of purpose, meaning, and fulfillment? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. Join me and follow along as I learn, apply, and share the strategies that the wealthy know and use that the rest of us weren't taught to create true financial freedom. My name is David Bell, and welcome to Pocket Mastermind. Tom, very warm welcome to the Pocket Mastermind podcast. How are you?
I'm good, man. Thanks for having me.
No, really good to speak to you. So we were just talking a bit before around what we're really going to discuss today, and you've got quite a long and varied background. Your journey has definitely not been straight. Probably the picture you see of the entrepreneur, like what people think is the straight line, and then the reality. I think it's probably your background. So share a bit, a kind of a snapshot, because it is quite a big journey of where you've been and now what you're doing today, and how, can you share the journey of how you got there a bit?
Yeah, I mean, I've actually been thinking about that too. Those lines, like when they do with a straight line and then yeah. I think most of that comes from this hustle mentality that we have, right? And we do 1 hour of thinking, F that, and 39 hours of action, right? Yeah. And that's when you just kind of, go off the rails and, like, oh, where am I now? Where like the right way to do things is usually, think about it for 39 hours and then just act on it for 1 hour and just go straight in that direction. Mm-hmm. But yeah, my life's been more on the action side for a long time, right? Which is most people. That's what we do, right? Yeah. The hustle culture is strong.
And what do you think do you think that meant that through the journey, that's why the journey became more varied, because you've kind of bounced from one action to another action?
Sort of. So there's a couple things, right? Like, you got to look at the age groups as well, right? Like, when you're younger, your job is to try a lot of things, to learn skills, to get into different situations. And then, like when you're a little older, kind of collect all that knowledge and stuff, and finally try to, hit those very, I would say, not niches, but like, it's kind of when you go all in, right? So initially is like, don't keep your eggs in one basket. That's the right motto. Yeah. And then it's do the one thing, right? But you move depending on age. Like, you don't necessarily want to focus on the one thing when you're 20, because when it doesn't work out, like, you kind of like, oh man, like, what now? Like, I haven't really figured things out. Now I'm 30 figuring it out. So it kind of depends on the age. So that was really me. Like, when I was between 16 and 30, it was just hustle left and right, man. If I see an opportunity, I'm in it. Like I had a record store, I did music, I filmed a documentary, I opened a record label, I opened a coffee shop. I was all over, man. Like I did my corporate stint too in sales. Like I wanted to learn skills also other than just doing business. And I thought, in my 20s, the one thing I want to do, I was always good at sales, but I didn't understand why it was working. Right. So I was like, I'm going to go to all these corporate places and they'll teach me sales. All these big corporations, they have, like not really schools, but they have kind of like little boot camps before you start the job.
Like training academy type.
Yeah,
things,
sort of.
Yeah.
Like between like a week or maybe a month. Like some of them would actually fly me out to these boot camps where we would do like 4 weeks or 6 weeks. So what I did is I, got hired, did the boot camp, got into the job, made some sales, try to hit goal because you have goals in every sales job, right? And quit and move on to the next one. Like they hated me. But I was like, look, we're both taking advantage of each other. Like I'm a number for you and you're a number for me. So, it's good. It's a win-win, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Yeah, they didn't really share
they
that.
Didn't see it the same way.
No, they didn't see it. But I was like, look, it is what it is, right?
Exactly. It's a game to be played.
Yeah, but that's like what you do in your 20s.
Yeah.
Right. And with me, there are two other factors. I was born in Poland and we moved to the States when I was 10. So, the big dream of my parents and all the Polish people I knew is you go to America, you make a lot of money, you come back to the country and you're a bowler, right? So that was pretty much the dream. I thought it was a okay dream, but I thought, what if I can make money in America all the time and then move to Poland? That's a whole different situation, right? Like if we can do that. After 20 years of not being in the country, I did go back for a bit and I realized the country is great. Warsaw is great. The rest of the country is okay, but the weather's crappy.
Yeah.
Right? It's just
I can share that. I live in the UK and Poland's colder than here. So
yeah, so the weather was crappy. And I'm like, I love the place for 3 months a year. Yeah, it's not really, that dream kind of like the balloon popped so quick. I was like, yeah, I'm not doing that. The other thing is, while I was working in those sales jobs, even though I knew there's a finishing line, because that's the thing that makes it bearable, right? Like if you think about even like the lower jobs, people right now in working at Amazon, fast food, call centers, and I mean 30 or 40% of the jobs overall in the West, like the one I read, are in those type of jobs, right? So it's like, it's companies that can't really figure out the robots to do things perfectly. So they try to put humans into those spots and then track them like they're robots. So it's unfulfilling, it causes, depression, anxiety, hopelessness, drug use, all these things, because humans are not meant to be robots, right? So, but even in those, I've seen if they have an end goal, like I'm going to make enough money for 4 months and then I'm going to do whatever I feel like, they're okay. But it's when you don't have that end in mind is when you're just, out of luck and hopeless. So with me, even though I had those end goals, when you're in those jobs, and sales jobs are not much better than robots. You have a script, you got to hit the doors, you got to hit the phones, whatever I did, like it's still not that much better. You don't think that much. And that 4-hour work week just landed in my lap, right? I don't know. You probably read that book. I think everyone. Yeah. So the book itself, it's okay. It's mediocre. It should have came with a big warning sign on the front page saying, "Hey, I'm Tim. I sold a business for 20 million, and then I figured this out."
Yeah.
Where most of us, we read that book and like, this is how we're going to start businesses. So it's like it was a complete mismatch of expectations. But anyways, that's on Tim. When I got that book, it just planted a seed in my mind, right? Like it was that, okay, I can make money with systems and I could live anywhere in the world. Like forget just Poland. Like it was my parents' dream and but I could kind of be free. I could do whatever I want to, by building systems, because that's what the book was about,
Yes.
creating systems, delegating, things like that. So you're not a solopreneur, which is what I've seen when I was selling too, like, because I sold mostly to businesses. And then when I went to, like moving companies, pizza shops, like all these different places, like mostly these guys are stuck. They can only leave for so long. They,
Yes.
they don't trust anyone. They can't trust anyone too much. Anytime someone's really good at building things and they hire a salesperson, that salesperson kind of runs their business, and they become, I would say, hostages in their own businesses, right? You can't tell the person who's making all the money what to do.
Yeah.
Because, so this happens a lot. It's sad.
Yeah, it's true, actually. It's true.
Yeah.
They suddenly get somebody who's bringing in all of the revenue. That person becomes more valuable than they are as the owner.
Yeah, so it was pathetic. Like, I would sometimes speak to the owner and be like, do you want to buy blah, blah, blah? Like, this is great. And like, oh, I got to get this person in because they're the one. I'm like, why am I even talking to you? You're just the owner on paper. Like, let me talk to them. Like, you're actually useless in this conversation. You have nothing to say. And they're like, really? I was like, yeah. Yeah, like, I don't need you.
There's
like,
that Polish directness.
I was like, I asked for the owner because I thought you were the guy in charge, but obviously you're not. Like, you're just not. So this was, it was funny. Later, I just stopped working with any people like that. Like in my further businesses. Like anytime I speak to an owner now and like, oh, I have to get this person from my team because they actually run the thing. I'm like, you got to fix your business before we even talk about anything else. Because I'm not getting into this. Like, this is just a train wreck waiting to happen. But that's a big mistake people do.
The kind of the abdication of their ownership and responsibility. Yeah.
Yeah, like, you do want to hire people with different skill sets, but you don't want anyone to be in charge of your business. Right? So even if you are hiring like that, like, one, you should either understand the system and then teach someone. So then you can easily, hire someone else, or try to create some kind of a buddy system, right? Where, like, if one of them goes, I got the next one and I can easily replace. Or you actually want to create systems, which this is the toughest one, but it's what I do now, is I create systems for my marketing and sales where I can get anyone off the street, train them to do certain pieces of it, which, again, going back to the Amazon and treating people like robots, that's kind of what I'm doing now with a lot, but it's the one way for me to make results happen and to not have to worry about someone quitting or, trying to become in charge of my business. I'm just like, you're all replaceable. I mean, I love my team, don't get me wrong, and they know it. But it's just, like, it's an unwritten rule that, like, I can easily replace and train someone else within days, right? So that's one mistake you don't want to make when you're starting businesses. And I've done it too. Like, I had partnerships where either the roles were not defined, right? So we're all kind of like, because that's what we do. We often want to start a business with someone we know, we're friends with, that we're close with. Oh yeah, we're so good. We're going to start a business. Next thing you realize, you're both marketers or you're both engineers. And it's like, okay, well, so who's doing what? And then who's doing that other part? Oh, we need to hire someone for that. I'm like, yeah, but this doesn't make any sense. Like, we're kind of working on the same exact thing, too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah.
And then we got to hire for the one thing that we need. Like, I don't know. So my advice, don't do partnerships unless, like, the skill sets are very different. Just hire those people. But again, in a way where they don't control your business. It's much easier for a salesperson to hire a builder and then replace them than for a builder to hire a marketer and replace them.
Yeah.
Especially in the beginning. Later on, both these roles become easy to replace. But in the beginning, this is very difficult to do. The other thing I think we should address is that hustling is no longer cute when you're 30, 40, 50, right? Like, in the beginning, when you're younger, everyone's like, oh man, you're so motivated. You're doing all these things, man. Like, if you were a stock, I would buy it. Like, people give you these things. When you're 30, 40, it's like, so what went wrong?
Yeah. Why are you still hustling?
Yeah, like, well, why are you like, haven't you like figured it out? Like, maybe you should go get a job. It just doesn't work as well
Hmm.
when you're older. So you kind of do want to focus in on one thing. But I don't know. Do you want to go into some of the lessons
Yeah, I
that
think
I've learned?
there's a couple of things I pick up on there. The interesting thing is when you talk about, you're hustling through your 20s and you're trying things. I think where a lot of frustration comes from a lot of people is actually that's not the path we end up taking, right? You kind of go through school, college, into a job, and then suddenly you realize that you're now staring down the barrel of a career in a particular direction that you, like you say, you've now tried it. You might want to do something else, and if when you're not when you haven't taken an entrepreneurial route early, I think it can feel for some people that you're now heading in a career that you're maybe not that passionate about, and it feels hard for some reason. I think for a lot of people, it feels harder to switch careers when you're not in an entrepreneurial mindset.
So this is when, and this is the same thing in business. And I'll give you examples of this. I made this mistake many times too. This is the consequence of taking the easy way out.
Mm-hmm.
Every single time. That is the consequence, right? You going to school, getting a job, letting other people control your destiny, easy way out. Eventually it's going to hit you, right? My initial businesses that I tried online were all easy ways out that all crashed. I let some platform control my business, right? Like when I did an SEO oriented business, it was all about Google. Then when we did our publishing business, all about the Kindle and Amazon store, and it was easier, always easier, right? Because you have these big companies that are sort of propping you up and then they take it all away. Right. But every single
Which is they're
time
famous for, right? They change their algorithm,
yeah,
they change
yeah.
their platform, they change all sorts of stuff.
Yeah. But this is no different with you, taking the easy, lazy way out and be
Yeah,
like, I'll just stick in this job, the paycheck is like crack. So I'll just keep taking it. Yeah.
yeah, so true.
And it's no different than, like you said, like they think they're not entrepreneurs, but it's the same thing in business. Like so many people do what you've just said, then they start a business again, taking the easy way out. Like my business now, we focus on online courses, right? And most people, instead of building up their own thing, but it's easier going on Udemy, but it's easier going on
Mm-hmm.
Fiverr Learn, but it's easier. And I'm like, yeah, but it's gonna crash at some point, and it does for every single one of them. But it's always that, like, but it's easier. This is what you got to watch out for. Like my business now, like we have rules. Like we cannot take easy ways anymore. Like we need to play long-term games with long-term people. Like we can't rely on a platform
Mm-hmm.
or our business will be finished, right? So this is more of a mindset issue. Like if you're going to follow someone else's narrative, then you're not really in control anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And the only thing in there is that it's easier every single time, but you got to do the hard things, man. Like that's what that's what it comes down to. Like some people even say that being a successful business guy is doing all the things no one else wants to.
It's
That's
yeah, and I think there's some truth in that because
some.
you're right.
Some.
I think the way that the traditional route as it's become is marketed as being the safe, which is a fallacy in itself, right? Because everybody knows somebody if they haven't been made redundant or some themselves, right? They're not in control, not really in control, but the illusion is put forwards that you're in. It's a safe route. You've got a job, you've got security, but you don't really. And the current times are showing that more than ever.
Yeah, the more someone tries to tell you that you're secure, the more of an illusion it usually is.
Yeah.
Right. So even when you think about careers, usually someone would say working for a small business or a startup is much riskier than a big corporation. Usually it's the opposite way.
Yes.
It's like with these platforms, building something on a big platform, like being a seller on Amazon. oh, it's much more stable than doing it yourself. It's not, because you don't control the list.
Look at how many people who've had their products ripped off by
Either
Amazon.
ripped off, or Amazon just blocks your account, or someone else steals your drop shipper. Like, so many things could happen. But the main thing is, like, you don't control your audience at all. Like, you don't know who you sold to.
Yeah.
You have zero control. But the illusion is there, right? Come to this big platform. So that's always my rule of thumb. The more someone else tells you they're honest or anything, usually it's the opposite. Right?
There's moral number one for today. The other thing I wanted to touch on that you spoke about, and I think there's a couple of angles we can think about this, is, you know, as you said, in some of the roles where you don't have an end game, there's no kind of point, there's no exit, there's no reason for doing it, and that's where there's no meaning, right? There's the lack of fulfillment, and we feel like robots. I think that's, you can look across that as, you know, in your own personal, this is something I'm quite passionate about, is having some kind of goal that you're trying to work towards. What does your life look like? Because then everything else, whatever you do, can become a means to an end, but you can then also design what you do. So that's something that I'm quite interested in, and then when you're as you are now, leading a team and running a team, and you have those roles which could fall into, how do you kind of help your team to still gain that fulfillment?
So I'm actually a very strange boss in some ways. Like, I get excited when my team takes off and wants to do stuff on their own.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, I'm super happy. I'm willing to help. What do you need? Like, if they just say, like, boss, like, I want to open my own company, I'm like, great. But let's kind of go over that as it relates to your audience, right? Because there's different ways. Like, the one thing I'll tell you, there's no magical place where you're going to build your business and then everything's going to be okay after that. So there's no, you know, little like unicorn meadow anywhere out there.
There's no end, right?
There's no real end. But what you do is, it depends where in your path you are, right? Mm-hmm. Like, if you're working with clients, your end goal might be build things that sell multiple times so I can finish working with clients, right? That's an end goal right there. Mm-hmm. If you're building something that sells multiple times, then you either think, am I building a lifestyle business, which is something I really enjoy, can spend a few hours on and do forever, and then focus on my life more? Or if it's not, you build something with an exit in mind, because I'm going to sell this business, mm-hmm. and then move on to either, you know, my life or whatever, like starting a new thing. So each situation has an end goal in some ways, but I just want to, you know, make sure everyone knows there's no, like, you know, like place where, like, this magical place where eventually, you know, you hit that spot and yeah. There's no such thing. Every single time there's going to be new problems, new situations you got to deal with. The one thing I can tell you, because this becomes scary for people who are beginning, I mean, like, just so much stuff's going to hit you that, you know, you think you might not be able to handle it. And I went through this. It's definitely hard. Like, when you're first starting out, it's always difficult. But one of my friends, which, you know, it's always nice having people who are a bit ahead of you on the journey, right? Like, I don't really look up to people, but it's nice having a little more experience that you can kind of, like, at least kind of lean on a little bit. You know, you should always count on yourself first. And I told him, like, I'm like, dude, like, this is rough, man. Like, yeah, sales are coming in, but, you know, I'm hustling all the time. Then we got to fulfill the sales. Then anytime I tell my employees to do anything, stuff's broken. Like, this was, you know, like in the beginning. And same thing happens now, but I just want to like really make sure we're talking about that time. And he's like, look, man, 1 year from now, this is going to be like another day. Like, you know, your skin grows thicker and you just, you know, you become more jaded in some ways. And he's right. That things that would have broke me or came close to breaking me 10 years ago, like, they happen every day now. I'm just like, yeah, okay, I'll take care of it after lunch. Like, I don't even miss a beat. Like, I just don't care anymore, you know. Not that I don't care to fix it, but it emotionally doesn't do anything.
It's not having the same impact on you and
At
your
all.
headspace.
Yeah, like a client gets upset about something. I'm like, that's what clients do. We'll handle it when we handle it. Yeah.
It's true.
Before, if they would like reach out to me over the weekend, like, oh, it's an emergency. I'm like, back then I would get stressed. Now I'm like, if it's an emergency, call a doctor. I'll be back on Monday.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's just, you become
Yeah.
used to things, right? It's like anything. So what you're feeling when you're starting your business is not how you're going to be feeling later on. Like all of it gets easier in a lot of ways. So that's something I wish someone told me like clearer when I was starting out, because it was very difficult for me. But that's how it works.
I liken it to fitness, right? When you
Same thing.
If you start from scratch and you want to start running 1K hurts and is hard. As you get fitter, you might run a marathon and it hurts and it's hard, but the 1K is now easy. You're always going to have some kind of pain, but it just you're now dealing with a greater load when you feel that pain.
Yeah, I mean, for people in the gym, they just need to think about their the progress they make on whatever. If it's the bench press, last year 110 pounds was tough. You got up to 180. Now when you put 110 on, you're just like, this is ridiculous, just back and forth till like you're tired, right? It's the same thing. Yeah, like your muscles, but like your emotional and other muscles get stronger as well. The other thing I've seen, and we also are kind of built towards this. There's an analogy. There's a bus analogy. I'll kind of take you through. When you start a business, you're getting onto a bus, right? This one bus, and you hit milestones, you get over obstacles, and you get to the next bus stop, and then the next thing happens. You get to the next bus stop, the next one. What most of us like to do is we'll get to like the third stop, and we'll hit some huge obstacle, blah, blah, blah. And instead of going to the next stop, we look at the bus next to us. Mm-hmm. And we see everyone being happier, richer, and the bus is just much nicer and cleaner. And we're just like, you know what? Screw this bus. I'm getting up to the next bus. You're back in square one. Mm-hmm. And then you get to the next stop, third stop, and you switch again. What happens is then you're like a 40, 50-year-old who says they have 20, 30 years of experience, but you actually have 10 3-year experiences. Right? It's not the same thing. Mm-hmm. Right? And as my friend always told me, when you get something that's sort of working, your skills are fine with it, you're making money, the niche is working, stay on the fucking bus. This is your 30s now. When we get into that, you skipped your 20s, you got the hustle out the way. In the 30s on, you stay on the fucking bus, unless there's a trend in your entire industry.
Yeah, if the industry disappeared, if you're Kodak, then you want to switch. Yeah,
you just don't. You look at the trends, but as long as the trends are upwards,
yeah,
it's not the industry, it's not the business model. Usually, it's you. Mm-hmm. You just need to get better. Stay on the bus, get to the next stop, and keep going. Right? Like, don't get off. It's the same thing. Like, no bus is gonna just magically take you to the 10th stop. You're always going to be like, oh man, this sucks again once you hit the same obstacle. So that's a big mistake a lot of us do. And like I said, in your 20s, that's fine. Mm-hmm. You actually have enough energy to ride 4 different buses at the same time sometimes, right? You do. But at some point, you pick one bus and you stick with it. And I'm telling you, like, since I've done that, things have become so much easier, so much more efficient. And it's hard for me to even look back. And I'm like, my God, if I knew this when I was like 22, but it doesn't work that way.
No,
it doesn't work that way. But I meet people now who are much older than me and finally figured out that we should, they should be staying on the same bus. But now when they're 50, 55, it's like, but you're only going to hit like a couple more stops, mm-hmm. Like it's not, you should, but it's like, it's sad to see.
Yeah. So what was the process you went through from the hustle? How did you start to refine down onto that single bus?
I mean, there were a lot of situations, and most of them were, like I said, I picked the easy way out multiple times, and every time we were making a ton of money and we crashed. And if you do that, unless you're a moron, if you do that for 3-4 times, and you realize like I'm starting over from scratch again, in a way, like, I mean, I still have my skills and network and stuff, but still I'm starting a business kind of from scratch because that business model, which I picked again, the easy way out, was nonsense. It took me a couple times, which means I'm a little of a slow learner, but eventually I'm like, look, like, we're not doing this again. We're just not. People still came to me with ideas like, oh, I should start a TikTok agency. You should start this, that. I'm always like, nah, I'm good. I'm so good. I'm going to do it the hard way. And it's actually a much easier way. Like I mentioned, it's so much easier if you actually, it takes a bit more skill to get going, but maybe we should talk a bit about the progression
definitely
of someone that hits the online business world, right? Because it's the same thing every single time. And if you don't do it properly, you're going to be hurting a little longer then. Yeah. So in the beginning, it's all about gaining skills, right? Having some kind of expertise. If you're in a career already, right, I would assume you have some kind of a skill. So you're not, going blindly into this whole thing, because you can take your skills that and move them online, because it's not anything different than just a way of selling, right? Because you're just selling online now than a person. So it's the same thing. Just take your skill. So let's skip the skill building, being an apprentice, whatever, like, getting jobs. The easiest thing to do initially is to have a service where you're either coaching or doing something for clients. Worst business model, easiest way to make money. And you want to make sure you're one of the highest charging ones in your industry, because it takes the same amount of work and it makes everything easier. You can get 2 clients instead of 10, right? So mentally, you'll be better.
And I think that's where a lot of people struggle, particularly when you're starting, right? Why is someone going to pay me more than somebody who's been doing it for so long? And the self-doubt is probably a barrier at that point, right?
Sure. So we made this mistake too, but you should be making mistakes, because that's how you're going to learn, right? In the beginning with our agency, we were a marketing agency for everybody. We did well, but if someone said like, why should I pick you over Jay Abraham or, one of those big guys? I'm like, if you can afford them, like, there's zero reason to, because they're the top what industry. So most of us make the Shark Tank mistake, and I'm going to go after this big market. And if I sell 1% of $1 billion, like, okay, yeah, but it's going to be tough, do it. And then you'll figure it out. So what we found is that this kind of happened by luck. One of our industry that we were working, which was the SEO industry, we had a client that we did SEO for, and then he wanted us to do online courses, blah, blah. This was like 7 years ago. People didn't know what those were. And after us doing the marketing business for so long, dealing with this issue, we finally realized, like, but we've been doing course marketing. We just found one little slice of our business, which we've been doing great. It's trending up. What if we go all in on that? It's a small industry. It's bigger now because of COVID, but it was very small back then. It was like maybe 80,000 total people in our industry. But we went into that and became a huge fish in a small pond immediately. Because we're like, we got all these skills, and now if someone says like, who should I pick? I was like, well, who are you going to pick? And they'll tell us like, some names. I'm like, yeah, I know these guys. I'm good. Like, there's nothing you can tell me that they do that I can't. So some people say, to pick a bigger market, maybe if you get really good at a small market, you can expand. But often you can find hidden opportunities in a small market. If you're in something for a long time, you see what other people don't see. So often that's not always the answer. You can actually stay in a small market and do really, really well.
Or
So
or
that,
the market grows as a result of your
yeah,
entering
yeah,
into it.
yeah. So there's different things, but that would kind of answer, people being scared of, like,
Yeah.
oh, yeah. So you niche down. But anyways, clients in the beginning, right? Everyone does this, makes enough money, and then they start thinking about the next step. And the next step is, how do I separate my income from my time? Eventually, everyone gets into it. If they don't, they regret it years after,
Mm-hmm.
And this is when people start building courses, software, different things that, with courses, you need to understand that the money comes in and out at different intervals, right? So it's not like a software business where you get a recurring amount every single month that's growing. It kind of ebbs and flows, right? But selling that type of, outcome is much easier, because the same thing that you've been doing for clients, you're just now selling as more of a do-it-yourself model.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the next easier step. Software is usually like the third, because it takes a lot more investment and it's tougher to get going, but it's something that you build with an exit in mind. Even if you don't ever want to sell it, you build it that way.
Mm-hmm.
Because it immediately gives you freedom, and it gives you that insurance policy in case you do want to leave, you can sell the business. So then you have some client work, which you can quit at any time. That's the best thing to remember. And then you have other streams of income, which now work that way, right? And then most people get tired of the whole industry. They'll sell the software business and go back into coaching, or, so like in the beginning, maybe they were teaching people how to do email marketing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they built everything around that. They had the clients, then they had the course, then they had the software, they sold that. And then they go into the next step, which is, how do I create a business and sell it? And they teach other people that, right? So they kind of move, in different paths, but it's the same thing. Initially, they'll get clients, then they'll create info, and then so that's kind of the path you want to follow. And if you feel yourself getting stuck in one too long, that's usually a danger kind of sign for you, a warning sign that if you don't get your shit together, you might end up as one of those friends I told you about that are 55, 60 and still dealing with clients and still haven't made the next move, and like, oh man, this sucks.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't continually get clients, I can't make money, and how am I going to retire? I'm like, yeah, but you didn't make the next step, which you should have made 10, 15 years ago, because you're taking the easy way out. Because clients are easy. Eventually, you're going to get so known, have so much traffic, that people are going to be knocking on your doors instead of you going after them. And then that's when it's like, okay, like we are moving into that step with this business. And now half my time I'm deciding, do I want to work with these people that are coming towards me? Because if I do, again, easy money, but I'm not working on my own stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So it becomes challenging, right? This is again where they're like, I'm not taking an easy way out anymore, because it's not going to lead anywhere, right? But this is something that you're constantly going to have to deal with. Even with the online course, like online courses are great, but they're not easy to sell usually, unless you create a brand around them.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have regular income. They come and go, right? There's different things, which is, it's a great business model, but it's not the end business model for most people, because you can get that exit. Not
Well,
the
the
big
thing
exit.
is, there's such a big market around them now, right? You've got, and some of the bigger names like Dean Graziosi, for example, with the Mastermind platform, and there's a bunch of others that are trying to sell this as the exit strategy of your or of the ordinary life. And what you just said there is the steps of having clients, then a course. I think that's getting missed quite a lot, and I think the dream is being sold as just anyone can create. You've got a video camera, create a course and sell it and become and earn 5 figures a month or 6 figures a month. And when should you be thinking about going down that route?
Like I said, you need that first step.
Mm.
Anytime someone's selling you on something that's not real, that's when the problem comes in.
Money.
Yeah, they're making the money. So the best courses are from people who have experience with a lot of clients or teaching bigger classes who have the outcome, and they just don't want to trade time for money anymore. That's the whole thing there, right? Like, this is when I'm like, for example, some of the best courses that sell are courses in really weird niches, right? Like calligraphy, some kind of a art, painting, playing, different type of instruments, like things. So what happens there is people living all over the world, because we're all different. We all have our weird stuff that we like. So you're going to have a ton of people that want to learn calligraphy or, writing Chinese symbols or whatever it is. And they cannot find anyone in their town. Think about the middle of the UK, the middle of America. Like, you're not going to find a master calligraphy guy in a town of 10,000 people, right? So that's the reasons they sell. Now, as a teacher, what choice do you have? Am I going to fly out one-on-one to all these people, creating small classes? Like, it's like, that doesn't really make sense. So this is when you take something that you're doing well with, and you just want to give the option to people who are so into it, but can't find teachers in their own area. And these do extremely well. The worst thing you can do is not be an actual freelancer, for example. Listen to a guy like Dean and create a course on how to become a freelancer.
Yeah.
When you haven't done it yet. But this happens all the time. Like, so many of the inquiries we get, can you help me market this course? I'm like, what kind of course is it? Blah, blah, blah. What are your credentials? Okay, you don't have any. What is your experience? Like, there was this one girl, man, and this was actually dangerous. I told her, like, you're treading on some dangerous ground. She's like, I'm going to teach people how to lose weight with my crazy something diet, blah, blah, blah. And I'm like, well, where did you get this from? What are your results? And she's like, oh, I just did it for myself, but that's not the point. She was actually not fit, right? Her reason for creating this really crazy course to throw people into is because she moved from a regular job to travel for a few months, and she didn't want to stop. Right? It was just all to make the money so she can keep doing what she's doing, instead of actually, one, having the expertise, having the outcomes, and caring about your students. And I hate those type of people. But that's, again, skipping that step where you actually...
It's because it all gets sold on it's all about the money. Whereas and I think where we forget is most of the most successful businesses, if not all, very much focused on the customer outcome. You look at the obvious ones, like even Amazon is still, it's all about this. It's gamifying the customer experience all the time. It's how do they make that little bit slicker so that more people use it? How do they get more people using how do they affect the customer outcome so that more people use their product? And I think if it's just about the money, that's where you're not thinking about the outcome, and that example, you run the risk of doing damage more than helping.
Yeah, especially if you're teaching people, like nutrition and things which, like, you have no idea about. I'm like, that is so dangerous. Like, you're recommending supplements and things which you have no idea about, but you're trying to get some of that affiliate money. You know what I mean? Like, everything was just super, super sketchy. So that's what I see with a lot of these course creators who, then whine, then, they're not successful and they don't know what it sells. Like, well, it shouldn't be selling. It's garbage.
Yeah.
But if you take the path that you're supposed to, you would have known. You would have had 50 or 60 clients that you would have took through. You would have the outcome, have the system, have the method, have the case studies, probably have, a lot of social proof from other parts. Like, you would have been good. And then people would understand, like, yeah, well, I mean, you no longer want to trade all your time for money. That's a normal thing. How do I expend that? But again, this is the steps that you kind of want to think about, right? Naturally. And it maybe takes a little longer, but it's actually much easier. Because as long as you're, let's say in the first step, like, you're getting clients, right? And in my business, to get clients, it didn't take much. Because if I got myself in the front of the right people, like, I came off and I could only do maybe 5-6 clients a month because we were pretty high end. It doesn't take much for that, right? But in my mind, like I know what the next step is. So we're going to keep building an email list, for the people who can't afford me, they're still interested. And how much easier is that if you're in front of people all the time, they're seeing like, man, you're making a killing for all these clients. And then after a year or two, eventually say, you know what, guys, I actually think I'm going to come out something that's affordable, like $250, $300, $400 for everybody else. I'll teach you what I know. And I'll still do it for a few, but I'll share it. Much different scenario than when you're just like, nobody knows me and buy my course, and like, let me just trust me on this. Just trust me. I know the process, right? Like I don't ever have to
advertising dollars. That's for sure.
Yeah. Like I never have to tell people like, trust me on this. I just tell them like, look, it is what it is. Like if you don't want it, it's fine. Like I'll be okay. I don't need your money, but it's a very different dynamic. Yeah. Right. And then think about the next step too. You've got clients, you've got the income, you've got the course, you have a lot of buying people from that course. Then within the same niche, eventually, you come up with a software thing. Now you market this new idea to 1,000 people who probably paid you something and another few thousand who have not, but trust you and know you and like you. And that's when these overnight successes happen. Right? So it's a longer path.
Is a great example of that.
Yeah, I mean, he spent, I don't know how many years putting out offers to figure it out, building email lists around his marketing and ideas. And when he actually put that out, and yeah, it's a clunky software, but it's a really good idea. He's a really good marketer.
He's a great marketer, yeah.
And he had a very big email list. Again, overnight success in a way, right? Very smart.
As a 15-year overnight success or whatever it was. Yeah.
Yeah, but I'm just saying, like, if you do want to go off on your own, like understand the steps.
Yeah.
Because if you remember, some of those constraints, don't take the easy way out. Don't let any platform control you. Don't hire or partner with anyone who can take you hostage in your own business. Follow the right steps. Like you're going to be so much ahead of almost anyone else around you. It's unbelievable.
I think there's a great message there. If someone's selling it as the easy way, then run a million miles. That the people that are making the money from that are the people that are selling you the easy way.
Always. Yeah. Like when people come to me and it's like, oh, can you just market the course? I'm like, I don't know. It depends. Everything depends. I don't know. Like there's a lot of factors here. Like I tell them, like, look, my goal is, to get you from A to B, is from where, you're not selling well to selling well. Was it validated? Is it not? Like there's so many factors, right? But I'm like, look, only thing I can promise you, I'm going to take about 3 years of your learning curve, by me coming in. But am I able to get it done? I don't know. How lucky are you? Because I can do everything right, every single thing. And then the last factor would be like, well, are you lucky? And do people like you? Because as an instructor, that's the one factor people don't realize. We're not selling a product, right? A regular product has two simple pieces: audience, message, right? You fit the offer with the right audience, boom, sells. With a course, okay, we got the right outcome, we got the right audience, and then people don't like you as a teacher. I can't, so that makes this business model, although it's great, I love the business model, a bit more difficult because there's that third component, which, if you're not very likable and not good on camera,
you're in trouble.
Because, if people have choices, at least for the most part, some niches are still, pretty empty, but for most part, I can say like, do I, this course and that course, what's the one thing I'm going to look for if everything else looks the same? The instructor.
Yeah.
Right. So, and I can't do anything about those. Like, I can't change you. so I tell people, and I'm, always very honest about it. I'm like, look, like there's so much I can do, but I'm not a magician, right? There's no, so we'll see.
True. But there's another valuable lesson there, is that if you do want to start creating any kind of product that involves you quite heavily, you got to understand who you are and where are the opportunities to develop you or your character or whatever. So and skills. So like you just said, confidence on camera, that kind of thing. Understanding where you are now and where you need to develop, and focus on doing that before creating the course. Because otherwise, you could end up with it. Like you just say, you could have the best course in the world, and then if you're shit, you're going nowhere.
Yeah, you're going nowhere, man. And all of it takes time. Like I do a lot of podcast things. Like I speak to so many people, and look, man, like this is a bit funny, but with my podcast, we're on like 100 and I think 50th episode, but even though I don't put out as much, and some people will come to me and be like, dude, I love your podcast. Should I just listen to the whole thing? And I'm like, if you want to keep liking it, skip the first 100 episodes.
Yeah, true.
Even though they're not bad, but they're not what I'm doing now. They're not at that level. So you got to keep putting things out, and you got to quickly realize, like if you look back like 4 or 5 years ago, it's like, that wasn't so good, even though you thought it was the best thing ever when you put it out. It's like,
that's good though. I think that's good. If you look back on 4 years and think, and it's still the same, you probably haven't learned anything.
Okay, yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, I don't have that issue. It's always like, ugh, I could have done much better on that. But
the truth is, you couldn't, could you? At the end of the day, you did what you did the best that you did in the position that you were in at that time.
So another big part is just consistency, right? Yeah. Just putting things out. If you're into podcasts, just put it out. Like for me, I do more other people's podcasts now. So even when my listeners, they'll be like, "Oh, Tom, you only put out 1 in 3 months." I was like, "Yeah, but I put out 15 on other people's podcasts. I'm kind of burnt out, Like there's only so much good stuff I can put out." So that's when you kind of think about systems more, right? Like that's part of my marketing system is podcast, but it works in 2 ways. Like outreach is one. Like I'll usually get a few people who are like, "Oh man, he was great," but it's also the SEO, getting a backlink from a similar thing. Like, so I always think of how can I help someone else? I give you a great episode, but at the same time, how can I build it into my marketing system? So I'm, doing my grind as well, right? Because that's all it is SEO is a grind. Doing 14 podcast episodes, it's fun, but it takes a lot out of you too. Yeah. But it's something that I can do. Like some people write better, but I can, do the podcast episodes, and it takes less energy than writing 15 blog posts for someone else.
I share that.
So you kind of, so you at some point you kind of figure out like what your strengths are.
Yeah.
And you create systems, marketing systems around that. And this is something I can do forever. Like we've been doing 3-4 episodes on other people's podcasts for over 2.5 years now. But it's a system, and I can continually do it. I'm okay with it. So, you don't want to do like those sprints where you do like 50, because I've done those. Oh man, they burn you out. Then you don't want to do anything for a long time.
Yeah. I'll tell you, one of the lessons I've learned from doing this is also control how much, because it's the same when you're doing your own, right? And I've recorded so many in a short space of time. Suddenly you staring down a barrel of editing, promoting, and like, shit, I got to start recording fewer in a short space of time, because it does take, you end up, your headspace is all in one task, and then you can't do a bunch of other things.
Yeah, so you always got to think about that, and like, what the systems are. Even with my podcast, like you have your own, there are always different ways that you're trying to do. 1, you want to learn about something. 2, you want to maybe inspire your audience. 3, you want to get people who you can connect with. Like in my industry, I'll get people from the educational industry on, and then once I get the owner of something on my podcast, we can easily get some kind of a win-win going down the road. Before, I used to get my perfect clients on my podcast, and almost everyone actually became my client afterwards, right? But it was one of the ways I used to get clients. So, different ways too, but I had systems around everything. There was a method to the whole madness, right? There's always. So I think, anything you do, you kind of always have to ask yourself, why am I doing this? Right? Is it because people said you should be doing it, or does it actually make sense for your business? I think it's very crucial.
Yeah, good. Right, we are coming to the end, and it's been really enjoyable. But before we sign off, I want to run through my standard questions with you. So we'll whistle through these. Um, do you have a morning routine of any sort? And if you do, what does it look like? I know you travel. You slow traveling is the
Yeah,
best
it's the
term at the
slow
moment.
travel. Yeah,
You're
slow
slow
travel.
traveling at the moment, and you're in Chiang Mai at the moment, right? So
Yeah.
does it?
Uh,
Do you still have a routine when you're traveling around, or does it vary depending on where you are?
it's usually the same because the routine became very simple. Like I tried all these like different things like, oh, I'm gonna visualize, meditate. Like they didn't do that much for me. Like I found, wake up in the morning, have at least 20 minutes of me looking out in the distance,
Hmm.
quietly time, where I can kind of get my head clear. I'll like my one addiction is I get ceremonial matcha imported from Japan wherever I am. Right. So I'll have a cup of that. I'll write down the three things I must accomplish that day. And then I'll just look at my calendar, like, okay, this is the stuff I got scheduled. And then everything else is whatever I feel like doing time after I finish my tasks. That's all I do in the morning. I try to make it as simple as possible.
Nice. The one of the key things there is obviously knowing exactly what you need to achieve in that day, because then
Yeah.
it becomes your
So
purpose.
the one thing I'll add is I'll often write what I need to do the night before. But by the time I wake up, I look at that list. And after asking myself why a couple times, they change.
Hmm.
I'm like, yeah, maybe I could do that, but I'm going to do these, because now it's like it's clearer to me. So
Hmm.
I think there's a book called Psycho Cybernetics, right? Like you put something into your mind before you go to sleep. When you
Hmm.
wake up, you kind of get the answers. Yeah, those three things usually change based on, whatever happens in my mind when I'm sleeping.
I like that. That's a good tactic. I'm gonna consider. This is why I ask these questions, because I always get great ideas. Three books that you'd recommend and why?
Thinking about this audience. Okay. Ups and downs in the business. Like if you really want to see what that looks like, Shoe Dog,
Hmm.
the
Nike.
guy who built Nike. Once I read that and I seen the stuff he went through, I was like, oh yeah, my problems are nothing. Um, Fiction books, which will teach you more about business than almost any business books. The Asian Saga.
Interesting. Never
There's
heard
a
of it.
couple different books in there. Noble House and I think Taipan stick out. It's written by one guy, starts with Shogun and gets to the end, but there's like the three books. Shogun was a great kind of military strategy book, but after that, it became more about this family dynasty building a business over many generations. And it was just an incredible series. It's a lot about human psychology,
Hmm.
which is really what business is all about. And the last one, I'm trying to think just how like brutal we want to be with the listeners, but How to Be Rich by Felix Dennis. It'll actually probably make you not want to be rich after you read that book. And it's really the only book you need to read if you think about growing something big like that.
Hmm.
That should be the only book you read, and you'll quickly know what that takes. Um, and for most people, they'll realize like, yeah, I don't want to become rich anymore. I just want to have a good lifestyle,
Yeah,
which is a good thing.
that's good. And then I guess the lifestyle one would, with the health warning, but the 4 hour work week gives you an idea of actually you don't necessarily need to be a millionaire, multi-millionaire to live a freer lifestyle. You got to find a way of generating the income that pays for the lifestyle that you want.
Yeah, I like the idea of that book more than the book. That's why I
Yes.
don't really recommend it.
Yeah.
Like the actual book, I think is very misleading in a lot of ways.
Yeah, he kind of glosses over the fact that he was earning a considerable amount of cash when he went off and to find himself. Yeah, so,
Yeah.
but some of the concepts are decent, I think. Three people that you recommend, following or listening to, whether they got good messages, whatever.
This is a very hard one for me. Like when I got into the music industry, I met a lot of my heroes from, back, and I realized I maybe shouldn't ever.
Yeah.
And it completely destroyed.
Realization. Yeah.
Yeah, it completely destroyed that idea for me. Like I have nobody I look up to like that. I'll just follow. Like I do have, a lot of people that I follow on Twitter that I think have good ideas,
Hmm.
but I'm more looking at the ideas than the people, right? So I'm
Yeah,
just like,
that's
oh,
that's
he
kind
came
of
up.
what I mean by it
Yeah,
is who has a good who potentially has a good outlook or a good message that maybe someone listening to this could benefit from.
I think Naval,
Hmm.
Naval, very good ideas on how to structure your life and things and business. Who was that guy who wrote Principles?
Ray Dalio.
That book
Yeah, incredible.
itself, the ideas are incredible. I would say those two. Like you don't need to follow many people. Like
No.
look, most of the things you're gonna have to do yourself and figure out. Like the more you're following people, the more you're just inviting distractions in your life.
Yeah. That's fair. That's fair. I would say if there's something particular you're trying to do is look at the people who have done it and see what they've done and see if there's any lessons you can avoid, make any mistakes you can avoid making, if possible.
Yeah, but then it really depends on your industry.
Yeah.
That's more, like if you're doing, like coaching on health or something, like you're kind of going to look for those people, right? And
Yeah.
there's not like a generic one you want to like. You don't want to
No, of
follow,
course.
these like hustle guys or anything like it. Just doesn't make sense.
No. Look at the people with longevity in history are probably your best bets. Like Ray Dalio is a great one. Look at what he's achieved with Bridgewater and he's
Yeah,
fully qualified to write the book Principles.
yeah. But you kind of want to look for those timeless,
Mm.
nuggets of knowledge more than like just the nonsense that comes out. Like I don't buy almost any of the new business books because
Well,
it's all
this is what I
like,
said. What you realise, well, if you do buy anything that's reasonably new, and I mean like in the last 20, 30 years, it's all regurgitating stuff from 100 years ago anyway.
yeah, like I think my friend just made a joke the other day. He's like, I started reading fiction books again. I was like, yeah, me too. My favorite category, business books from the last 5 years.
So true, so true. I just the more things I see and the more things I read, they're just regurgitations of the tried and tested
But a lot
stuff
of it
of the
is just
past. And
fiction,
some of
man.
it's
It's
bullshit.
like
Yeah,
it's always like someone trying to have you read a book so that you can go into their ecosystem or funnel.
yes,
Right? Like anytime you see a book written because there's a end in mind for the author, it's fiction.
yes.
Right. So that's why I laugh. Like most of them are
That's a
complete
great
fiction.
lesson. That's a great lesson. Three habits or disciplines that you've adopted in your life that you think have served you well.
I think thinking in systems and not habits. That was one which really made things easier and changed everything. Having a regular gym routine,
Hmm.
like first thing in the morning, like 4 times a week, like that helps a lot too with just, like my whole mind state. And taking the right supplements. Like, you gotta, do obviously a full blood work and things to figure out
Hmm.
your deficiencies. But, the more I speak with my friends too, like once you find that out, like someone might have like a lot of fatigue and can't really focus
Hmm.
and stuff. And then they'll realize, oh yeah, I just had a B12 deficiency or I had a vitamin D deficiency, just something easy that's
Hmm.
so fixable. And then they're like, yeah, I feel great now. So doing that made a lot of difference too, like in the long term, work.
Yeah, great theme there. Mind, mind and health, because without those two things working, you, it's an uphill battle. On that similar subject, then, three tools, systems, apps that you use in your everyday life that kind of help you either be productive or efficient or whatever.
I mean, this is really hard because like the way I live my life and like I outsource all the mundane things, right? Like I have someone that cleans my house. I have someone that like does massages. I have someone that I had someone that cooked, but then the girlfriend said she wants to cook. So, but I had someone for that. Like laundry, all these things like I outsource. Like I don't want to think about it at all. Like all these mundane things, right? Podcasting has been a huge tool in my business, either going on podcasts or stuff. So marketing systems, like that's been big. And with everything else, like, yeah, it's really about systems, because even with the health things, like I build things that I can do for a long time, and then I do it for 3 months. I test the system, see if I can break it, and then I'll kind of redo things and try it again. But yeah, the theme would be systems over anything else.
I like the test, test and refine. Everything that you do and everything that you use is a good lesson there. Last question for you. While I clear my throat. If you could spend an hour with anybody, and I know you don't want to meet your heroes, but an hour with anybody, dead or alive, maybe a dead person would be a good one. Who would that be?
Like really, myself when I was 20 years old.
That's a great answer. Yeah,
I would really want to have a talk with that guy and be like, look, man, like everything they told you is a lie in a lot of ways. Let me explain to you how this works. And it would be everything about like, business relationships, the whole narrative, like the way you move forward and like, deal with issues, like everything. I would be like, look, man, this is all pretty simple. Let me just lay it out. And then you go do your thing.
Do you think you'd have listened to yourself though? That's the question.
So I wouldn't listen to any specific things that I said, but I would plant the ideas much quicker, right? Because that's the thing with all of us. Yeah. Like someone tells us a new thing, which kind of like, yeah, that's stupid, but we can't get rid of it. And eventually we're like, yeah, that was actually pretty smart. So just planting those ideas, right? Like you could do this, you could do that. And like, doesn't this seem like off a bit? I would just make sure that all these things that I'm thinking back then, someone just kind of, just gives a little bit of a, I don't know, is that really true? So I wish I just had that time, then maybe 5 years after I would have figured out a lot of stuff. Be like, yeah, you're right. Working for big corporations, I can see that's a dumb idea. And this is like, there's a lot of things I would have, taking the easy way out, would have probably learned it much quicker because, when it first happens, you're just like, oh man, let me try again. Oh man. But if someone planted that seed, it would have happened once and you would have been like, oh yeah, he was right.
Yeah.
Right.
You may have seen that it was the easy way out sooner, right?
Yeah. These were these things. Yeah. So it's all about just planting those ideas sooner. And that's what I kind of want to accomplish on all these podcasts when, I have an audience that's sort of like, oh man, I wish I could do something else. Like it's so possible. Like I'm fairly talented, but I'm not more talented than almost anyone else. Like we all think we're above average, but we're usually all sort of like average when it comes down to it.
It's a human fallacy, isn't it?
It's a human fallacy. So I'm like, look, it's just the way that you're thinking of things that's off. Because I was the same way. Like, we're so ingrained by, like our peers and people at work, like, oh, this is the only way. It's like, no, is it really? Is it really? Is Bob in accounting that's been there for 20 years really that happy and fulfilled? Like, is that what you want to end up like? That was the one thing I did when I was in those corporations. And it was actually very lucky that I kind of came up with this. I looked in the people 10, 20 years ahead of me in, the roles, because I went for a short time, but I still did it. And I looked, and I would be like, hey, Bob, you've been in here for 20 years. How do you feel? I was like, oh, I hate this job. I'm like,
there's your warning sign.
I'm like, oh, man, like, Bob, who else has been there? Well, Andrew's been in there, but, man, he's a slimy one, man. He's been getting, like, he's been, I was like, so I spoke with Andrew, and I'm just like, dude, this guy, dirty and brown nosing. I'm like, and he's like, I like this job. I'm like, oh, man, this is who I got to be. And, so you do want to do that really quick. Like if you think.
I love that.
So yeah, that's my piece of advice. If you're in business, go to those people way ahead of you and go ask Susie or whoever it is, like, hey, how are you doing? And then like really take a look.
See how much they How much they look forward to Monday morning.
No, and that's the thing, right? Like with the people who do look forward to, try to figure out what kind of person this is.
Yeah.
Because if you see someone that loves their job and then you see that their character is something like, oh man, like this is not how I want to be. Like I'm not a sociopath or I'm not whatever. Then you got to understand, like if you can't be like this person and you're like Bob who wants everything done right, but he hates every single day. Right. But it's just, it gives you that idea of like, maybe I'm not on the right track, you know?
That's a great gem. Tom, thank you very much for your time. And where can people track you down if they want to either listen to the podcast or they want to learn more about the business or anything that they want to get in contact with you?
So everything that we do is always under Smart Brand Marketing. So just smartbrandmarketing.com. You can contact me. I'm easy to get a hold of. And anything we build is underneath that, right? So any like new things, new content, new stuff that comes out, it'll always be that services. We might sell it off or kill it, but that place will always kind of, stay there. So easiest one.
Thanks, Tom. Look forward to speaking to you again at some point in the future.
Yeah, man, it was good. Thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for listening to this conversation. If you enjoyed it and you'd like to hear more similar episodes, head over to pocketmastermind.com, where you'll also find the links mentioned in this conversation. And if you haven't done so already, please leave us a review. It will really help us to get our message out and let more people know about these episodes. So leave us a review, leave us a rating, hit the subscribe button, and please share with your friends. Until next time, thank you again for listening.